Hey, everybody. StreamYard just told me it's showtime. So I am not putting the pressure on myself to have this actually be showtime, but I am really hoping that we can talk today about perfectionism and anxiety in a way that is super helpful for you and helps to reframe the topic and maybe begin to even put in place a different way of thinking and feeling about primarily yourself. So as you join on, feel free to say hello. I know that Isadora, Christy, and Helen have signed in already on YouTube. Hi, Jess. Nice to see you. For people who are watching on Facebook, if you send me a comment, please put your name in your comment if you have not yet given StreamYard access to seeing who you are, because Facebook protects your privacy. So for those of you watching the replay, feel free to post comments and I will be notified of them and I will respond in a couple of days if you have a question or a comment or something you'd like to chime in. It's always super helpful to hear from people who are watching on the replay as well. So let's see here. This is a big topic, and I also think it is something that resonates with most of us. Most of us feel either that we need to be perfect or that there are other people who are perfect and therefore we fall short, or that somehow we should be perfect and we're not, so we may not even bother trying. So there's a lot of ways that perfectionism can manifest, and we really have a society that unfortunately seems to focus on some kind of concept of perfectionism. So, and Elaine, I see you signing in. Hello. Oh, holidays making the perfectionism flare up. Absolutely. And hello, Joanne, and hello, Alan. So where do we start with this topic? I came up with 3 things I was suggesting to everybody that you think about leaving behind in 2020. And all 3 of them take work. So if you begin to work on it now, it will be really using 2021 to let go of these things. But the 3 things were comparisonitis, perfectionism, and imposter syndrome. So I plan to do imposter syndrome either next week or the week after. And last week I did comparisonitis, and I know that some of you were on there with me on that one. And all 3 of these really have a similar root, all related to issues of self-esteem and what does self-esteem mean and how do we build self-esteem. So we're going to come back to that towards the end of today. But let's start with talking about perfectionism. And I would say this will sound similar to something we talked about last week with the comparisonitis. But perfectionism is based on a myth, on a complete myth. There is no such thing as perfect as a human. I don't think there's anything that we do or that has been done that is perfect. Perfect can kind of be seen as similar to infinity. And if you think about infinity, first of all, we might know what the concept means, but it's really hard to grasp, right? Infinity is very hard to get our human brains around. And then let's say time is infinite and we're moving towards that time. That infinity stays equally far away. And perfection is actually the same. So I think it's key to identify when our thinking is based on truly faulty beliefs. So I'd love to hear from you right now as to whether or not this makes sense to you, whether you agree that perfectionism is a myth. And if you don't agree and you think there is something perfect, let me know what that is. Let me know what in your life or in your experience is actually perfect, because I'd love to hear from that. And hello to Teresa. Hello to Zachary. Nice to see you all. So usually it takes about 20 seconds or so to get comments through. So I hop around a little bit and then come back to it. But again, just really think about, what do you know of that's perfect? And clearly I'm not perfect because my texting just went off. So let me turn the sound off on that one. And take a second and turn the sound off on this one. There we go. So, and hello from whoever is joining from Canada. So somebody's sharing perfectionism is draining. Yes. So, but let me know, is there something that's perfect? Now, I know in my own experience, there are moments that I feel are perfect, often like if I'm in nature, and there are elements of nature that I think are perfect, like if it's snowing, sometimes it just can be magical, right? And let's say a snowflake falls on you and you look at this magical little crystalline thing, right? And you might think, wow, what a perfect snowflake. But part of what makes it perfect is that it's imperfect. Does that make any sense? Let me know. Vicky is sharing, I have the angel and devil on my shoulders. I know that being perfect is not a thing, but I still have that voice saying I need to be perfect. Okay. Nicole is watching from the Philippines. Alan, I guess everyone has their own idea of perfection. So Alan, what is your idea of perfection? That's sort of what I'm asking right now. Is like, what do you think is perfect? Because I would really say that perfect doesn't really exist. So if we all have our own idea of perfection and it's solely an idea and an ideal, that's totally different than if it's a reality, right? So, okay, alignment, body, mind, and soul, that's as good as it gets, therefore it's human and perfect. Yes, so if we can realign what we think of as perfect, I would agree with you, but there might be a better word, because perfectionism is really based in this continual striving for an unrealistic ideal. So when we talk about, and there's a lot of debate about, well, maybe perfectionism is a good thing. And I would say honestly that I don't think perfectionism is ever a good thing. Striving for excellence, good thing. Being motivated to succeed, good thing. Wanting to do your best, awesome. None of that is actually perfectionism. Perfectionism is a continual and almost compulsive desire and need to achieve something that actually is not achievable. So being a high achiever can be exhausting, but also if we let go of some perfectionism and really align with our values, we can sometimes be a high achiever and have it not be exhausting. So that could also be sort of a realistic goal, right? Elaine is sharing, thoughts are not things. Absolutely, thoughts are not things. So bring to mind a moment right now. I'm just going to ask you all to really do a little bit of reflection and bring to mind a moment where you were maybe struggling with your perfectionism or aware that you were being perfectionistic and you were frustrated. So just take a moment and think about a recent time, if you have one, where you were feeling perfectionistic. So as you're doing that, let's go under the feeling. Let's go to that moment that you just brought to mind and really go under it. What's driving it? Is what's driving it a fear of being ridiculed? Is what's driving it a fear of disappointing someone? Is what's driving it truly just simply not feeling good about yourself? So really think about what is driving that moment. And I would suggest that for 90% of the people listening to this video, what is driving your perfectionism is anxiety, is an anxious need to be perfect to avoid some kind of unnamed consequence you might not even be sure of. Your cognitive brain is going to know that consequence doesn't exist, right? But that emotional brain might be like, oh, yes, it does. Oh, yes, it does. And Barbara really doesn't know what she's talking about here, because she really doesn't know how bad it will be if I let people see how imperfect I am. So Vicky is sharing fear of failure and disappointing others. Yep. So anytime we are feeling a fear of something, that is anxiety, that is anxious thinking. So just to keep that in mind, to make that connection, because people don't always. Jessica is sharing from Germany that since working with her therapist, she's been introducing herself as a recovering perfectionist. Great. I used to think it was a compliment, and now I know better. Absolutely. That's great. Zachary feels that my definition of perfectionism is clinical, not human. Okay. However, in my view, I'm talking to people who are struggling with perfectionism. My guess is that this would not be a particular topic of interest, a particular video you're interested in, unless perfectionism is somehow causing you pain. And let me just say that the research shows that people who have high perfectionist tendencies have higher rates of all sorts of clinical problems, anxiety and depression, and overall just suffer with low self-esteem. Now, perfectionism is also tied to what we talked about last week in terms of comparisonitis, because there's a comparison that goes on, right? If you're perfect, you're comparing yourself to a not perfect state, or there's some ideal you're achieving, or there's some like ranking that's going on there, and some external view combined with it. So all of that leads to us feeling not good enough, right? And then the anxiety, the other piece that's anxiety with this topic is that anxiety comes up when we are trying to do something that's impossible. So if we are worrying about something, right, if we're worrying about a problem in our life and there are steps we can take, then we can take those steps and we don't need the anxiety. When we're worrying about something in our life and there's nothing we can do, like we're powerless, that's where our anxiety spins out of control. So if we set an ideal for ourselves that is too high, or a standard that's too high, then we will always be in a continual state of anxiety. Let me know if that makes sense. Okay, Alan is sharing that, yeah, the perfectionism is a fear of feeling bad about yourself. Yes, Elaine's sharing it springs from comparisonitis. Yeah, yes, absolutely. And it's very isolating and shame-based. Yeah. So the research really does document that it is not a healthy frame of mind. So again, I'm differentiating perfectionism from an overall, like if you're an artist, you want to produce a work you're proud of, awesome. There's actually a fairly funny little video on perfectionism on YouTube, which I could link for you guys later. But the guy starts he has a whiteboard and he draws a circle and he says, okay, I'm going to demonstrate perfectionism by drawing this circle. And then he draws obviously a very imperfect circle. And then he's like, well, let me make that a little bit more perfect. And then I'll make it a little bit more perfect. And it's actually amusing because you're really bored and you're like, okay, let's get on with this. It really doesn't matter whether your circle is perfect or not, which is the point. So if you're at a job where your perfectionism has actually been mentioned in a review as holding you back, which I know many people where this happens, they get so perfectionistic about the presentation that they're preparing, or they want the slides to look so beautiful, or they want to like triple check and quadruple check that there's no typos in it, so they never get the thing done on time. And then that impacts the entire organization, right? Or I've also known somebody who, this was a few years ago, right? So people were gathering for Christmas and she had to have her Christmas tree be exactly perfect, which meant nobody else could help her decorate it. Like her kids weren't allowed to decorate it. Her husband wasn't allowed to contribute. So she was blocking her family from having fun because she needed this Christmas tree to match some ideal in her head. So perfectionism, we often focus on how bad it makes us feel, but it also can impact all of those around us. And when we work with our value system and what's really important to us in life, and we really try to put that foremost, that can really help to get through some of these perfectionist tendencies. So Vicky is saying that's me, and Giuliani, it makes sense. And Elaine, we have many family stories about me and the perfect tree, right? So that kind of perfectionism is almost like a attempt to control the chaos in life, right? Like we might feel things are out of control, so we're gonna like be really, really perfect in this one area, or we're gonna do this thing really right. And again, since there's no such thing, it leaves us in this continual state of anxiety and not being present and not being mindful and not enjoying, right? Enjoying life. So great. Someone on Facebook, yes, okay. My perfectionism manifests as an inner critic. I call her perfectionista. I'm learning to quiet that critic by assigning her assignments to keep her busy. I love that, Joanne. Yeah. And Joanne has worked on that in some of the groups with me in terms of actually sometimes coming up with a personality for that inner critic, like a little character you can put on your shoulder and give a name to. And then I love the fact that Joanne assigns her tasks. Here, you can go do these perfectionistic tasks and let me move on with my life. So that's a great creative way to adapt to the problem. So I also want to talk about perfectionism and just briefly, some of the roots of perfectionism. And then also its tie to something called fixed mindset instead of growth mindset. And I don't know how many people on here are familiar with those concepts. I'm going to give a very brief little connection to it. But a fixed mindset basically assumes that we are given certain talents at birth, and it's talents that help us achieve things. And that it's not about hard work, it's not about effort, it's not about failing and trying and revisiting. It's really about, if I have the talent to do this, then I'm great at it. And our society kind of creates that in children by labeling them, right? Like, okay, oh, you're the one who's great in math, you're so great in math. Then that kid fails a test and feels like, oh, I'm a fraud, I'm not great in math. And my failure on this test proves I'm not great in math. Instead of the failure on that test proving that he's smart enough to move on to more advanced work, and it's going to take more effort. So when we praise children for their innate qualities that are achievement oriented, right? You're so smart, you're so kind, you're great at this, you're great at that. While that seems really encouraging, if we're not also emphasizing and strengthening the effort that's put in, we could be creating a fixed mindset. So fixed versus growth mindsets are really much more about like, okay, don't know how to do this, but I can figure it out, or I can challenge myself to learn this. I know I can learn, I can grow, I can change. Fixed mindset is, I've always been, I say this sometimes, I'm bad at languages, which isn't totally true, because in high school I could do Spanish perfectly fine. I never learned to speak it. And I've never had really the opportunity to live in a foreign country and really be immersed in a language, which I would like to do one day. Yet I will sometimes say that, and that is reflective of a fixed mindset. You know, this is a set thing about me. I'm no good at languages, versus a growth mindset, which is like, one day I'd like to live overseas and really take an immersion language class, really throw myself into it and see how far I get. I know it's not easy at an older age, but I'd love to try it and see how it goes. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, fixed mindset versus growth mindset. But the way that this ties to perfectionism is, if I have a fixed mindset, and let's say I think I'm really, really talented at art, and I have this innate talent and I go through high school and I achieve all sorts of awards, and I go through college and I achieve a handful of awards. But as I'm getting towards the end of college, I'm not getting as many awards as I used to get. And then maybe I get blocked out of the residency I apply for. And all of a sudden I hit failure. The fixed mindset says, you've been a fake the whole time. You're not really good in art. You're a failure. You can't compete. You're worthless, right? That's the fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset can go with the perfectionism, because if I'm not perfect at this, it's going to prove that I have no worth. So I'm weaving together some fairly complex concepts. So I'm hoping that this is making sense, because I know this whole talk is a little bit more freeform than some of my other ones. But let me know if you're with me here. Perfectionism, decision paralysis, and excessive procrastination. I think if I can't do something well, I don't want to do it at all. Right, so there's a little bit of a fixed mindset in there, that I should be able to do this well. And if I can't, I'm not going to even try. Instead of a growth mindset, which is, you know what? Maybe it's not the thing that comes easiest to me, but I can learn it. And by doing it, and then possibly either failing or not doing as great as I might have done otherwise, I can get better and better and better. And I will tell you, if you're doing something like I started a YouTube channel at the age of 59, a year and a half ago, if I had been perfectionistic about it, I never, ever, ever would have gotten a video out, ever. There's no way to do this kind of thing, either live or pre-recorded. Pre-recorded is actually, in a way, a little bit harder, because you think by editing, you can get it to like really say what you want to say. There's no way to do this with perfectionism. So perfectionism does cause procrastination, absolutely. And then tying it to the anxiety, I think that's the way to begin to recover from the perfectionism, is recognize it as a myth, and then recognize it as anxiety that's tied to some kind of possibly amorphous fear that's not actually true. Okay, so Jessica is relating that she was really good at things as a kid, hit failure later, and just abandoned whatever I wasn't immediately good at. Yes, unfortunately, that's super common. And it might be useful to look into this whole concept of fixed mindset versus growth, but it can be changed. We can switch and have a growth mindset and say, okay, I did have some innate talent, right? But innate talent is not what makes people succeed. Innate talent is not the main thing. Commitment, drive, risk-taking, being willing to fail, being willing to take the steps, that's really like almost every success story you'll read about is somebody who was able to have the perseverance and persevere through. Now, where does that come from? That comes from a sense of self. I call it authentic confidence. I call it being okay with who I am and as I am. Because if I'm truly okay with who I am and as I am, I can give this YouTube thing a try. If it doesn't work, I'll try something else, right? If my entire self-worth is based on how quickly I get subscribers, or how many good comments I get, or whatever it is I think I'm going to achieve by doing this, if that's my entire focus, I'll be obsessive, upset, discouraged. So this ties back to what we talked about last week again, in terms of using external achievements or failures to determine our sense of worth. So that's a big topic, but it is our inherent sense of worth. And working on that, if we don't have a good sense of our own inherent self-worth, that's the place to start. The more comfortable I am with who I am, the easier it will be to let go of perfectionism, comparisonitis, the one that I always forget, impostor syndrome, right? Going with perfectionism. I think last week I was like listing them out and I couldn't remember And Joanne actually reminded me of the third one. So, okay, good. People are relating. Detachment from outcome to determine self-worth. Determine self-worth. Let's think about that. Determine. It's more of a belief. It is not something we have to prove. We are all worthy. We're all worthy of being human. So it comes from inside. Hopefully that makes some sense too. Okay, there's a handful of other things I wanted to talk about. People who brag a lot. I imagine you can think of a couple of people you know, or at least one, who's always bragging. Well, I just earned this much money, and oh, I just got this promotion, and oh, hey, did you see that I just did this and I did that? Okay, everybody knows somebody like that? Those people actually do not have authentic confidence. They probably don't have very high self-esteem. They are boosting their sense of self-esteem with their bragging, and their need for others to admire them is their downfall and probably keeps them pretty unhappy. So I think a lot of people who connect to the work I'm doing online don't tend to be people who brag. They tend to be people who hold back from that. Although some of us might vacillate between the two, right? But they're the same thing. They're the same coin, two sides to the same coin. The braggart and the person who's always putting themselves down, same thing. The confidence is not, it's not just kind of like, I'm okay with who I am. I'm okay with who I am. Yes, and Juliana's sharing her siblings who are best students were the most rewarded. Yes, we set that up in families all the time. Children grow up feeling that their worth is dependent on their achievement. And different families will have different values. So some families it will be you have to achieve in academics. Others will be you have to achieve in sports. Some will be like you can achieve anywhere you want, but you better achieve. And that does develop people who feel that their entire self-worth is based on what they achieve. And that to be accepted and loved by others, I have to be perfect. And there's no such thing. So I know that I'm talking a long time because this really is, probably I should break this out into a couple of different subsets. And so if you guys have ideas on that, post it in the comments, let me know. Talked about the fixed versus growth mindset, all or nothing thinking, which is a major cognitive distortion, comes into perfectionism, right? I'm either perfect or I'm a failure. It's all or nothing thinking. I either do it really, really well, or I may not do it. I might as well not do it at all or nothing thinking. So again, these are things just to begin to label and recognize, because that is the first step in recovering from it. And yeah, so perfectionism can cause us to fail. So I know that what I was going to say is then again, just to bringing it back to the fact that it's a myth. Now, I want to end today by letting you all know, for those who don't, some of you are already in my coaching program, but for those of you who are not, these are exactly the kind of things we work on, and it's 6 months long because these things will not change overnight. They're unlikely to change from one YouTube video or even 10. They take time, they take perspective, right? So often we have to work with somebody else. It doesn't have to be with me, but I get a lot of comments from people who are trying to do everything self-help, and that works for some people. But if we're trying to solve a particular problem in here with this, right, we are limited by how we're seeing the world. So outside perspective can really help. Encouragement, support, accountability, group setting where you are able to relate to other people who are going through the same thing that you are, or are having experiences that are the same. The group component of different programs can be magical. So Jess is posting, thank you, Jess, a link to the class I have. It's called, or course program, Roadmap to Joy and Authentic Confidence. And it's not like a canned course where you just sort of download stuff and that's it. You're on your own. It does have a course site. It has a step-by-step program over the course of 6 months. You can go through the pre-recorded videos. There are then live videos specific just to that program. And then there's twice a month coaching where we do group coaching. People can bring me a specific issue they're working on, and we are changing mindset. We're learning tools to not think in an anxious way. We are developing authentic confidence. That's really the goal of it. And so really moving towards joy, rewiring what's going on in here. So wanted to let you guys know that. And if you're not sure if it's a fit for you or not, you can schedule a 20-minute conversation with me just to make sure the program fits for you. So take a look. Let me know if you have questions on that. And I also just lastly, before I end today, want to tie the perfectionism back to this concept of negative core beliefs. Because I think that most people who really struggle with perfectionism have a handful of negative core beliefs. And that negative core belief could be, I'm not good enough. It could be, I'm not worthy if I'm not achieving. And it could also be, I'm not safe. It could be a feeling of being in danger. That if you grew up in an environment where if your behavior wasn't perfect, you got either criticized or hit or ignored. I find with people that if they grew up in an environment where they were ignored when they didn't do the right thing, that is almost the hardest to recover from, because attachment is so important to us as humans. Attachment is key. And attachment, when we're young, we want to stay attached to our caregivers. And that attachment sometimes requires that we take on these negative beliefs about ourselves. And then later in life, they're haunting us and we like almost can't even figure out why. So it takes work, it takes healing, but it can be done. So, okay, I got a bingo from Juliana. And Jessica, I'm glad you could make it live as well. I'm great. Elaine said the talk's been useful. And Nora talking about the failing with the perfectionism. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So again, I will check in with your comments after this talk. And I'm aware of what a big topic it is in terms of trying to tackle it in 30 minutes. But I'm hopeful that I gave you perhaps a new way to look at some of it. And if you can begin to, as Joanne suggested, create a little figurine on your shoulder that can be your, perfectionist inner critic going da 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 da. That's a way to separate, calm it down. Like, it's okay. It's okay. I can hand in this paper, or I can mail in this short story, or I can finish this project at work. And if there's a typo and someone lets me know, I'll correct it and it will be okay. It'll be okay. So that's really my desire in being online, is to help each and every one of you feel okay as you are with who you are. All right. I'll see you guys next week.